Hello, explorers, and welcome to Reach the World's Explorer program. For more than 25 years, Reach the World has inspired youth to become curious, confident, and compassionate global citizens through virtual exchange. My name is Tim, and today we start to get answers to the big question, no pun intended, what happens when an elephant dies? In just a minute, we'll connect live with Fulbright U.S. student program researcher and ecologist, and I should add educator, Ryan Helcoski in South Africa, where he is working hard to answer this very question. We're very lucky to have him as our expert guide on this learning journey. Because we're just getting started with this virtual exchange journey together, I have a few reminders for the educators and students who are part of the expedition. If you haven't already read Ryan's first virtual exchange article, I've put a link to his journey homepage in the chat area, and you'll want to check it out after we're finished today. There are many more articles to come from Ryan, and they will all be posted there over the coming weeks. And also watch your mailboxes for your expedition flag. Most of those went out this week. We have an amazing expedition team from across the U.S., and I want to shout out just a few of you. Miss Buchholz's class at Keystone Montessori in Massachusetts, hello. Miss Hawkinjoe's students at St. James School, New Jersey, hello. Miss Bittner's students at Manzano Mesa Elementary in New Mexico, welcome. Miss Ramos's students at PS 257 in New York, got some questions ready to go. I love to see it. Miss Brown students at Beaumont Elementary in Pennsylvania, Miss Lake students at Robinson Elementary in Rhode Island, and Miss Swanson students at Evergreen Avenue Elementary in New Jersey, just to name a few of you. Everyone, welcome, welcome, welcome. We are joining in slightly different ways today, so however you're following, thanks for being here. If you're joining us via YouTube, drop those questions and comments for Ryan in the chat at any time, and we'll fold them into today's event. All right. No more delay, let's get to it. Joining us all the way from Kruger National Park in South Africa, please welcome Ryan. Hey, Ryan.
Hi, Tim.
Hey, it's great to see you. We've been very much looking forward to connecting with you. And I think the first question we need to start with is, where are you today? What an interesting background.
Yeah, so I'm a little outside Kruger right now. I had to do some field work in the park, and I'm kind of traveling between the area now. But at our next live stream, I'll be directly inside Kruger National Park, right by the fence.
Fabulous. And can you give us a sense of where Kruger National Park is in the world? If we're all sitting in our classrooms in the US, how would one get to Kruger National Park from anywhere in the United States?
Good question. That is a long flight. So it's so far away from the United States that I'm the exact opposite season of you right now. We're actually heading into fall. It's going to be winter soon, and we're kind of already there. Here in Kruger, winter is the dry season. It doesn't rain very much. We're just coming out of the rainy season. And to get here, you have to cross an ocean, and you have to go to the very, very, very southern tip of Africa. If you look at a map, I don't know if you have a map, but if you have one handy, South Africa is a country on the tip, the southern part of Africa, and then Kruger National Park is in the northeast section near Mozambique. It's actually right on the border. I've driven and worked in Mozambique as well.
All right, fabulous. And what time is it at where you are right now?
It is 6:04 p.m.
6:04 p.m.
No,
So
I'm wrong. 5:04.
5:04. Okay, so you're at least 5, 6, 7 hours ahead of most of the students who are joining today. Thank you so much for staying up and for joining us today. We have a lot to talk about. We're right at the beginning of this virtual exchange journey together. We really want to get to know you today and learn how you, Ryan, went from being a student in a classroom in the United States somewhere to being a Fulbright researcher in South Africa. Can you take us a little bit through that journey?
Yeah, I don't want to use up too much time with it because it's long. From a student in the classroom, so you're talking like grade school, right? That's what we got.
Yeah,
mostly...
let's start where our students who are joining us today are right now.
All right, cool. So when I was a lot younger and I was in the United States, I remember I always loved being outside, and I was always interested in the natural world. And I had like insect collections, and I learned about different plants, and I was in I was in Cub Scouts, and then I was in Boy Scouts, and I just always loved playing outside and being outdoors. And after high school, I went to college. I got my undergraduate degree in biology and education. And from there, I traveled to Ecuador. I taught English, environmental science, and computer science for a year. And then I backpacked around Central and South America, wound up in Costa Rica, worked at a nature reserve, came to the United States, and I was a science teacher, high school biology, for many years in Baltimore. And then from there, I started pursuing my master's degree. I have a master's in sustainability that I pursued at the University of Maryland, and I worked for the Smithsonian, and I worked for governments in Indonesia and India and lots of other places. We can talk more about it if you want. And through it all, I've always been fascinated with the natural world, and it's been my dream to be an ecologist since I was really little, but I didn't know what that meant, and I didn't know how to get here, which was tough because I was the first person in my family to go to college. Nobody knew anything about a college degree or how to get into education or anything. So I kind of went back and forth a lot, but I'm really happy that I've had the experiences that I have.
Awesome. And now you are a Fulbright grantee, a researcher in South Africa, doing some really cool work, which is going to be the focus of our journey together. A lot of the classrooms that are joining today have received their expedition flag. I've got mine flying behind me here. Can you, we are trying to answer a big question. What happens when elephants die? And there's a lot of ways you can answer that question, but you look at it through a certain lens. And maybe you can start by sort of explaining our logo for the expedition. That can give us a general overview of what you're looking at around dead elephants.
That's an excellent question. Yeah, so there's a lot of, I mean, it's a big question, and there's a lot of different aspects to it, right? Most people, when they hear that question, probably think that I'm focusing on like the herd. Like what does the herd do when the elephant dies? Like one less elephant in the world, oh my God. But there's 30,000 elephants in the park. I see hundreds every day. There's probably more than 48,000 in Kruger National Park. Kruger National Park is very, very big. It's twice for those of you in the West, it's twice the size of Yellowstone, and those of you on the East, it's bigger than the state of New Jersey. So that's a single park bigger than a U.S. state. It's very, very big. And there's a huge amount of wildlife there. And so elephant population has been increasing. And so although they're an endangered species, African bush elephants are endangered, they're extremely abundant here. So we're not looking at them in terms of how does this affect the population? What I want to know is, what does this mean for the ecosystem? What does this mean nearby? And that logo, if you have the flag, or if you see the flag in the background, there's kind of a tree that's coming out of it, and there's other animals coming nearby, there's some scavengers. And it all has to do with cycling, nutrient cycles. You probably know like photosynthesis, right? The stuff that the plants behind me are doing, and cellular respiration. You know, you breathe out carbon dioxide, and plants like take in that carbon dioxide, and that's what they build their bodies, right? Like the physical stuff that plants are made of, it doesn't come out of the ground. I know the plants grow out of the ground, but this physical matter came from the air, carbon dioxide from the air, most of that. And so this picture is kind of getting at like the ecological sense, the cycling sense, because when an elephant dies, there's going to be a lot of scavengers that come there that eat it up. They release more carbon dioxide. When it decomposes the soil, like the actual soil beneath your feet, like this stuff, it breathes. It actually respires like you and me, because there's microorganisms in the soil that live there. Like when you're walking on dirt, unless it's completely sterile, there's tiny little things in there. And so we measure at those sites respiration. How much is the soil breathing? We look at nutrients in trees. We find that there's more and more nutrients. You'll see, like where I'm sitting right now, hopefully my camera, I don't know. Anyway, it's a lot wetter here. You can see there's different types of vegetation growing. So an elephant, the death site of an elephant, even though it's ripped apart by scavengers, is very valuable because it's a nutrient hotspot. Just like here behind me, where there's a little bit of water, there's a lot more growth. Farther away, you'll see, I don't know if I can do the camera too far, there's a lot of just like grassy areas. And so that nutrient, the elephant's death site, is an important nutrient hotspot. And that's what I'm studying. That's what I'm looking into, is how does that impact the environment? Because in the savanna, there's a lot of heterogeneity. That means differences, just like all the trees here. And I want to know how the death of an elephant could play into that.
All right. Fascinating. We are going to dive into every aspect of that, including how you study those things, which is a big question that I have. A lot of our early questions from students are about elephants specifically. Not surprising. It's astounding that you get to see hundreds of elephants a day. That fact is still settling in with me. What a cool job to have. We have a bunch of students who are joining us live today. And I think it might be worth pausing for a moment and getting some of our elephant questions out of the way before we get into sort of the ecology of elephants that have died and how they affect the ecosystem. So I'm going to welcome one of our classes up on the stage. I've got class 302 in Sunset Park. Hello. How you doing today, guys? Oh, I'll get you unmuted. Or
I was muted. Okay.
Very good. Hey, is there anyone in Sunset Park who's got an elephant question for our explorer Ryan? I see some hands up. Let's get some elephant questions out of the way.
Let's start with Japheth.
Do you guys investigate elephant bones?
Do you investigate elephant bones?
Yes, I do. I've picked up thousands of elephant bones. I've been to a lot of elephant carcass sites, and the bones are massive. There are bones that are bigger than you guys, lots bigger. Their skulls are huge. I don't have any with me, but you'll see a lot more footage as it goes through. I've picked up the bones. When we go to the sites, we measure the bones, we mark the locations of the bones, we drill into the bones and take some samples. And you know who else picks up bones? Are other elephants. They come back to the sites that have they're dead. They mourn. They revisit them again and again and again. Good question.
Amazing. Wonderful question. Let's take one more question from Sunset Park, and then we'll welcome another one of our classes backstage on. Go ahead.
Allison.
How much elephants or elephant bones do you see a day?
Ooh, good question. It depends on the carcass. So elephants are matriarchal. That means that they are essentially ruled by a female. The males mostly wander from herd to herd. The elephant herds, the ones that you've seen, they're led by a matriarch, a female who's in charge. And she has all of her daughters with her, and her daughters, etc., and a few very young little males. And so if one of them dies, then those bones, they take their bones away. They spread them all throughout. And so if I go to a female site, I might see 2-3 bones, but if I go to a male site, because they're less likely to be visited, I can see 300-400 bones, and that means that that's going to be a very long work day.
Amazing. Probably a good work day, but a long work day. Thank you so much, friends in Sunset Park. We'll come back to you in just a bit, okay?
Thank you.
All right. I see Miss Swanson's class is ready with some questions, so why don't we bring Miss Swanson's class on? Hello, Miss Swanson's class. How you doing? Let's get you unmuted, and there we are. Hello. All right, so we looks like we have some brave question askers who want to get us started.
Yes, Andrew has a question. Hold on. Go ahead, Andrew.
What happens to the skin of an elephant when it dies?
I couldn't hear the question. What was it?
He asked, what happens to the skin of an elephant when it dies?
Ooh, that's a good question. All right, so depends. It's mostly eaten by scavengers. There's so many hyenas, and I'll send you footage a bit later, but there's so many hyenas. Their jaws are strong enough. An elephant's bone is bigger than my forearm. It's very, very, very thick, and they can crack it. They have extremely strong teeth, hyenas. So they tear through the skin. Vultures eat the skin. Lions, I've been to areas where lions have been right there. If they come in, the rest of the scavengers leave. They mostly eat it, but there are parts of the skin, the bottom, the soles of their feet, are about that thick. They're very, very thick, and not much can really eat it. So we usually still find the soles of their feet years later until it slowly decomposes.
Fabulous question. Do we have one more from Miss Swanson's class? Looks like we have 20 more, but let's take one more for now.
Hi.
So, what is South Africa like?
Ooh, okay, good question. There's a lot of ways to answer that. So South Africa is the wealthiest country in the African nation, or the African continent. Geez, it's very arid for the most part. It's a lot drier. The I guess it's similar to parts of California. It's not like if you're on the East Coast, there's very little rain, there's no snow. It stays about the same temperature all year round. But in the dry season, you'll go 3, 4, 5, 6 months without rain. There is a lot of wilderness, but there's also a lot of cities. There's big cities that, in my opinion, are more modern than the United States. I had to go to a pharmacy the other day, and there was a bigger selection than anything I've seen in the United States. The diet is a bit different, but it's really good. Lots of great food, lots of great people, a lot of people interested in wildlife and conservation too. Many different languages too. Did say that. Most people here speak 5 or 6 languages on average.
Wow, that's amazing.
Too.
Thank you so much, Miss Swanson's class. We'll come back to you. And Miss Trader's class, you're waiting so patiently here. Let's bring you on for a question or two if you have it as well. Hello, I see you all. It's great to see you today. Do one or two of you have a kickoff question for Ryan? We gotta get you unmuted as well. There we go. Hello.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi guys. Good to see y'all.
How big are elephants?
How big? Well, when they're little, when they're babies, I don't know if the birds are talking right now. They're going to be loud. When they're babies, when they're little babies, when they're newborn, they're about the size of a golden retriever. And that's the smallest they're ever going to be. And then they keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger from there. They're definitely bigger than a car. They're huge, especially the males. The males are bigger than the females on average.
That is a wonderful question. For my mind, there's nothing cuter than a baby elephant. I'm just going to put that out there, my opinion.
They don't even know how to use their trunks a lot of the time. So you'll see, and they're lazy too. Most elephants, they sleep standing. They only sleep for 2 to 3 hours a day. But the babies, they'll like flop down. I've seen one like grab onto its mom and be dragged as it didn't want to go. It was tired. They got little legs.
Excellent. All right. Let's get our next question from Miss Trader's class. Please go ahead when you're ready.
How long does it take for an elephant to be full grown?
How long does it take for an elephant to be full grown? I think it depends if it's, well, let's say, I guess full grown, we're looking at around 30, 35 years before they're really full grown. They kind of stop growing around that point, and they live to be somewhere in their 70s for the most part.
Fabulous. Those are great questions from Ms. Trader's class. I'm going to move you backstage. Thank you so much. We'll come back to all of our on-camera classrooms who have more questions later. But I want to loop in a couple of questions from Ms. Lake's class, who's putting them into the chat right now. This one specifically, Ryan, for you is, how long have you been researching elephants?
This is my 3rd year now. So a PhD program is usually between 4 and 5 years, sometimes a lot longer, depending on what you're doing. I'm in my 3rd year, and I'm spending the entirety of my 3rd year in South Africa, mostly in the bush, doing field work. So I see elephants and lions and hyenas and vultures and hippos every day, really.
Excellent. And one more for you that I think you're going to like. What do you like about your job? What is fun about it?
I do like my job a lot. I love science because when you're doing science, you're trying to answer a question that you can't look up. For example, if you wanted to know the average lifespan of a blue whale, you could look that up. You can Google it. You can't Google what happens after an elephant dies because we don't know yet. That's what I'm doing. I'm contributing to our wider understanding of our planet, and I love that. I also love working outside. I get to work outside, be outside, I have to do a lot of writing. There's a lot of writing and statistics in science, but it's still a good part of it, I think.
Fabulous. And while we're on a roll, let's throw you another fun one from Miss Lake's class. What's your favorite animal, and what's the oldest bone you have found?
My favorite animal is a microscopic one that you're never going to know of. Even those of you that are super into biology have never heard of these things. They're called micronathozoans. I can send that to you later. It's a monophyletic phylum. There's only one species that exists, and it's so different from every other species of animal that has its complete own phylum. Just like how starfish are in Echinodermata in humans, and and all mammals, everything with a backbone is part of chordata. It's completely on its own. The oldest bone I've found, I'll answer that in two ways. The oldest bone that I have confirmed is 10 years, but we've found some that we believe are around 20. I've never found any older than that. And that's because park records of elephant deaths don't go back that much further. There could be much older bones out there. There definitely are, but I haven't found them.
All right, excellent. And we finished with these first questions from Miss Lake's class. I described you as being in Rhode Island before. I'm sorry, you're in Vermont. I want to officially correct the record. Thank you so much for joining us from Vermont today. Ryan, we are going to get to more student questions in a little bit, but I want to ask you a very practical question about what it means to be a field researcher in South Africa. What is a typical day like for you? How would you, from the moment you wake up, when do you wake up? How would you expect to spend your day?
Yeah, okay, that's a really good question. So there's three main different things I'm doing here. One is field work, which I'm going to talk about. Another one is I teach at a university called the University of Mpumalanga. And the third thing I do is analysis. And at the University of Mpumalanga, I might teach 1 or 2 classes a day, and it's on basic research methods. I get into the office, prepare my lessons, and teach, similar to a teacher, except you're a professor, same thing. And then days where I do analysis, I start pretty early, and I'm mostly in front of a computer all day. But when I'm doing field research, which is about half the time that I'm here, I have to wake up before the sun rises. We start really, really early. I usually wake up around 4 a.m. and I have to get all of my gear together. I have a lot of gear. My backpack in pounds, I think, is close to 80 pounds or so that I have to carry out into the bush. I have to pick up the field crew, people that are working with me. So I start in like a round oval. It's a kind of like a hut, a fancy looking like national park sort of thing I stay in. And from 4 a.m., I get my breakfast ready. I have breakfast really early. I pick up everybody else before 5, and we're usually in the field before sunrise, or we're about to step out of the vehicle. Right when the sun rises, usually when we step out of our vehicle, because it gets so hot during the day. In Fahrenheit, it would be over 110 degrees Fahrenheit. It's very hot, and you can't really work when it's that hot outside, and you're carrying 80 pounds on your back, and you're measuring all of these bones and picking things up and drilling things and putting poles into the ground. And so I usually work from before sunrise until around 2 p.m. and that's when it starts getting really, really hot. And then we have to drive back. We're usually back in the camp maybe around 4 or 5 p.m. and at that point I have dinner, and then I have to enter my data, because as a field researcher, I'm in the bush and I'm writing down everything, right? You have to make notes of everything you're doing. And then when I get back, I have to enter my data onto, an electronic data sheet, and then I submit that. And so I'm usually back done with data entry around 6 p.m. and that's when I cook and have dinner, and I go to bed pretty early. I got to wake up pretty early.
That sounds like an amazing, long, exhausting, action-packed day.
Yeah, I mean, there's also like the thing too is like traffic for me means there's like an elephant in the road, or the lions will come onto the road and they'll walk really slow, and you gotta be like, oh my God, I gotta get to work, and there's these lions. It's like a weird problem to have.
Very
Elephants,
interesting.
They don't want to listen. Elephants don't want to listen. If you're in the road or something, they don't care. They're not going to move. The little ones will. Sometimes the big ones will charge. They'll mock charge. We've been charged before and to scare things away.
Excellent. Well, our friends in Sunset Park are going to need to go in a couple minutes, so I want to bring them back on for a couple more questions before we lose them for the day. Hello again, friends in Sunset Park. If you have a couple more questions to ask Ryan before you need to move
Hi,
on,
Sunset Park.
the floor is yours.
Okay.
We have Andy.
Andy.
How old are the elephants when they die, and also what do you eat?
Okay, so he wants to know how old are usually the elephants when they die, and what do you eat in South Africa?
Good question about the elephants. The average age is in the 60s. Probably, I've had some that seem to be in the upper 70s. You can't really, they have numerous sets of teeth. And when their last sets of teeth starts to wear down, that's how you can kind of tell their age. So they could be older than that, but somewhere in the 60s, 70s is where most of them die. For breakfast, I always eat a gigantic bowl of oatmeal because it's easy to make and I can eat a lot of it because I've got to be driving. I basically don't eat again until I have dinner. And for dinner, I have something like, it's a dish they call here pop. It's like fufu. It's like a thick cornmeal kind of thing, and I'll have meat with that for dinner usually, and vegetables.
Okay. All right, Layla.
What's the biggest bone that you found, and what's your favorite color?
What's the biggest bone you found, and what's your favorite color?
Biggest bone is a femur that I found. I think it was a femur of a male, a bull male. He was massive. In feet, that femur, that single bone would be over 5 feet tall. So really, really big. That one was tough to measure. Favorite color, I have two. It's black and white.
A little bigger than Miss Sanchez. Yeah. A little taller than Miss Sanchez. Okay.
Oh, she's standing. Yeah, if you show the 5 foot, yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
We're bigger than his favorite color is black and white.
Excellent. Do you have one more question for Ryan before you have to go for the day? I'll let Miss Sanchez pick.
Okay. Kobe.
What do elephants eat?
What do elephants eat?
So that's a good question. So there are kind of two types of mammalian herbivores. There's browsers. Browsers eat stuff like leaves here. And then grazers eat stuff like grass. They eat little grass. So like deer, white-tailed deer are usually grazers. They eat this. Elephants do both. Elephants eat anything. I've seen them eat thorns. They're herbivores. They're vegetarians. They only eat plants. But I've seen them pull down trees. I've seen them eat bark. I've seen them eat roots. I've seen them pick up just whole. And what they do with the grass with their trunk, they don't want to eat the dirt, but they like the roots. So they'll take it and they shake it around and they'll eat it. Sometimes they'll slap the dirt to get off of it. So plant matter, all kinds of plant matter.
Nice.
Excellent. Sunset Park, have a fabulous day. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you again next time.
Hey, guys.
All right, Miss Swanson, let's come over to you again. I know you've got questions. Your students are jumping out of their chairs with questions for Ryan. So let's
cool.
ask a few of them.
Hello, Miss Swanson's third grade.
Good to see you again.
What is the most dangerous animal you studied?
Oh, the most dangerous animal that I've studied. Ooh, it might be elephants. I have studied venomous snakes. I worked with venomous reptiles. But elephants are really big. All right, so wait, okay. Probably the most dangerous animal I've worked with in terms of venom were black mambas. When I worked at the National Zoo in DC, I worked in the reptile house. I worked with venomous reptiles. I also removed venomous reptiles in Costa Rica. Fer-de-lance is a very venomous snake that I worked with. But the only animal out here in the bush that I'm actually, if I hear it, I like freeze are hippos because they are very scary. They're very big. And if you are near the water, they're going to stay in the water. They don't care. But if you're in the bush, an area like this, if I heard a hippo right now, I would run immediately. So hippos, I guess. But I don't study them. They're just there.
We'll be looking over your shoulder while you're answering these questions, just to help you out. All right, fabulous question. Some surprising answers too, I think, to that one. Go ahead, Ms. Swanson. Students.
So I'll ask this question on many of my students' behalf: is why do you study elephant dung? or poop?
Oh, okay. Yeah, good question. So elephants, so dung is fertilizer, you know. It has nutrients that plants use to grow, like nitrogen and phosphorus. So when animals defecate in an area, that fertilizes it, but too much of it can be poisonous. Just like too much of a good thing can kill plants. You put too much nitrogen, too much phosphorus, it can kill the plants. And so we want to know how much dung they're depositing at these areas because we want to know what effect that's having on the plants. And we also use it as a measure to see how much they revisit. We found that the amount of dung at a site is very high because they'll revisit, and then around 800 days, that amount of dung starts to drop after they stop visiting. So 2 reasons: 1, to check nutrients, and 2, to learn about elephant visitation.
Excellent. Thank you for that great question. Let's take one more from Miss Swanson's class, please.
Benny.
What happens to the acid inside the elephant?
What happens to the what?
It's
The acid that's inside the elephant.
Ooh, that's a good question. Yeah, that's spilled onto the ground. So the elephants, actually, I like that you asked that because when we find a carcass, and I've seen fresh carcasses and old carcasses, I've seen everything. The fresh ones, anyway, the stomach acid, once the animals start ripping into it, like the hyenas and the vultures and the lions, when they start ripping into it and they hit the stomach, it spills out onto the earth. And the only thing, some of the only things the animals won't eat is the partially digested food that was inside its stomach. So we find that there on the ground, and that does change the acidity of the soil nearby. Their microorganisms are also spilled out into the earth there.
Excellent
I don't
question.
want to get
Thank
too
you,
graphic,
Miss.
but
Thank you, Miss
that's a lot of
Swanson's
stuff.
class. I feel like we're getting into the real great ecology-related questions here. I'm going to move you backstage, Miss Swanson. We'll come back to you, I promise, for all those people who had their hands raised. Ryan, I wanted to share a couple questions from Miss Ramos's class. She submitted them through email. Sophia was wondering if it's sad to study dead elephants.
Ooh, good question. I think, no, I don't think it's sad, because the interesting thing is that as ecologists, we often study how nutrients cycle and the impact that elephants have in life. But what's interesting is that even after they're gone, they're still affecting the environment. They're dead, but their story isn't over. Their nutrients are still cycling and flowing. They're always flowing. We're always part of these nutrient cycles. I would say even the behaviors of other elephants, that can sometimes be sad. Sometimes you'll see elephants near carcass sites and they're sub-vocalizing. They're making noises that aren't audible to us, and we don't actually really know what they're doing. They'll raise their foot. That's another thing we're looking at. They kind of raise their feet. And elephants are some of the few animals, aside from humans, that have audible signals to identify each other, which means names. And they are definitely impacted by the death, especially females in a group. They're impacted by each other's death. But I don't know if I would say it's sad as much as maybe meaningful.
All right, yeah, sure. No, but we haven't really explicitly said yet on this call that you're studying elephants that have died of natural causes. Circle of life. Yes. They're animals that have passed away naturally, and it's just a part of life, I guess. Another question from Ms. Ramos's students. There are a couple of questions, one from Juan and one from Malin, related to the tusks of elephants. What happens to the tusks after an elephant dies? Yeah, generally, what do you find? Do you ever find tusks?
So I do not find tusks because the Park Service actually removes them so that they don't get poached. So South Africa does not sell ivory, but they do collect it. So there are stockpiles of it, and that is to deter poachers from coming onto the park and trying to steal it. There are parks that don't do that, And I have seen footage, I haven't been there personally, but their elephants are really interested in each other's tusks, and especially the jaws. I've seen many times that the elephants, when they come to the carcass sites, they'll kind of touch the inside of the dead jaws. We think they could be identifying each other. They are obsessed with the jaws and the skulls and the tusks. In South Africa, the park rangers collect them and lock them away. Don't know what'll happen with them, maybe nothing, maybe it's just storage. And in other parts of the world where they're not locked up, the elephants will particularly walk with them for kilometers and kilometers with those tusks.
Wow.
And we don't know why.
Very interesting. Very interesting. One more from Ms. Ramos's class. Alejandro, and you addressed this a little bit at the beginning of our call, was sort of pondering what would happen if all elephants died. And it sounds like in Kruger National Park, the population is really healthy. And you said growing, right?
Yeah, it is. I don't want to go too, okay, that's a really good question, because if all elephants died, just everywhere, we're just pretending they just went, and they all just suddenly died. The ecological effects would be astounding, because elephants are ecosystem engineers. They push over trees, they push over giant trees. And when they do this, they change the vegetation, they eat certain trees. And without them there, a lot of the savanna would probably regrow into forested land, like what's here. In most of the savanna, it's mostly grass. And elephants kind of help it maintain its savanna-like state. I think that the ecosystem, the entire ecosystem would shift if African bush elephants were to all die out suddenly.
All right, great question, great answer. Thank you, Ms. Ramos' students, for those great questions. Got a couple more questions from Ms. Lake's students here. How about this one? Are bones heavy?
Yes, they're very heavy. Let me think. The heaviest one is probably around 60 pounds. Sometimes we get really, really light ones and little pieces of bones and like the hyoid bones in your inner ear. But for the most part, they're quite heavy.
All right, very good. We answered the question of how big some bones can be. You said the biggest bone was about 5 feet or more long, a femur bone. That's pretty cool. How about this question? You talked about how old elephants can get, but the question is, do you work alone?
No. So I go out with a small team. There's usually 4 to 5 of us total. I'm the lead biologist or ecologist. There's research assistants that are usually there with me. Sometimes we have different crews for different projects. But no, I'm not alone in the bush. I'm alone right now, but not when I'm out there.
All right, excellent. And Miss Swanson's class, I see you backstage. You've had so many great questions today. Some of our other classrooms have had to move on to other parts of your day. So why don't we finish today with as many questions from your students as we can get to before we have to sign off. So go ahead.
Jolly, you can come over. Go ahead, Jolly.
What's the strongest part of the elephant's body?
The strongest part. I don't know exactly what you mean. What do you mean by strongest? Clarify.
What do you mean by strongest?
Like, what helps them to like survive from like other animals?
Oh, what's the most useful part?
Oh, that would be the trunk, definitely. Their trunks are very large. There's not a single bone inside of it. It's all muscle.
Excellent.
How many animals have died there? I mean, in the national
Park.
Like
So do you have a
total,
count
or
of
what do you mean?
total.
Well, all animals or elephants?
elephants?
Elephants. Okay. How many elephants have died in the national park? In the last 20 years, I think it's been over 30,000 elephants. There's definitely been way more than that have died total, though. There's a lot of elephants here. They're very, very common.
When an elephant dies and it smells, how do you like clean it and stuff?
So I don't clean it, but When it's, all right, so this is going to be a little gross, but won't be too gross. When an animal dies, at first the carcass is fresh. In fact, the immune system still works for 24 hours. So it still fights infection. A fresh carcass is the meat that you eat in the grocery store. It's fresh, there's no smell. And then about 48 hours, that's when you hit bloat. That's when it gets really, really big and it's going to explode and animals start ripping into it and it smells terrible. You have to put like Vaseline under your nose. And then after that, you have active decay where all of the juices and stuff are spilling out and there's lots of hyenas and vultures. Advanced decay, that's when it starts to dry out, doesn't smell too bad. And then after that is remains. That's where all that's left are really bones and thick skin. And tail hairs. Their tail hairs last a long time.
Great question.
How much do you make, and have you met any celebrities?
How much do I make in terms of money? I do not make much. I'm a student. Science doesn't pay very well. If you want to make money, don't be a scientist. Celebrities, I guess so. I've met, I don't know their names and I don't care, but I've met a lot of people that have done like wildlife photography, and I've met, I don't know what his name is. He's a short guy. He's a host of National Geographic. I've probably met a lot of people in the Explorers Club and the Jackson Wild and stuff, but I don't know who they are. I never remember them.
Ryan, one way to address that question, I think, before we get to the next one is, can you tell us a little bit about your Fulbright grant, how Fulbright supports your research, and whether or not you see other people on a regular basis as you're going around the Kruger National Park?
That's a good question. So the Fulbright program, I am funded by the U.S. government. And in the Fulbright, they essentially pay you to go to other countries and do a certain project. So I proposed my project and they funded me. And in the park, I'm mostly work with a small team, but through the Fulbright, I meet a lot of people in government and in social media. I get invited to different dinners at the embassies. And it's because of my involvement with Fulbright that I'm really able to do that stuff.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. To our patient question asker, please unmute and go ahead when you're ready.
What happens to the heart and guts of the elephant?
The heart and gut, those are eaten pretty quickly. Animals really like the heart and they like the guts. They don't like what's inside the guts. So the half-digested grasses and stuff, they leave there. And we still find that years later.
Excellent question. I love that our students are not afraid to get into the icky stuff. Seems like we're diving right in.
So how many animals have you studied?
How many animals have you studied?
Animals. Are you talking about different species or like total elephants?
Like total elephants.
Total elephants. I've been at more than 120 carcass sites, and I've studied a lot of different individual species. Most of my work before I was here actually dealt with trees, so I did a lot of work looking at tree rings instead of animals.
Great question. Ms. Swanson, can we have one final grand finale question? We're going to have to cut it off for today, but we're going to come back to Ryan again very shortly, and we'll get to ask a lot more questions.
How many different species have you studied, and what have you learned from them?
Oh my God, that's a big question. I have studied probably 20 different species in detail. I've learned that certain species have behaviors in common, like elephants revisit carcasses. Snakes don't do that. But even within that like specific type, there's a huge range of personalities. I've met tortoises that remember me at the National Zoo in DC. They remember their trainers. They remember them for years. And they're like just turtles, but they're pretty smart. And I've learned that some of them can be really, really nice. They listen to you. They'll go where you want. And others will absolutely not do that. They'll go the other way. So there's a range of personalities within a species. That's what I've learned.
What an excellent question to end on. I love the fact that we have covered a lot about elephants now. And in our next articles and our next talk with you, Ryan, next time we join you in South Africa, we can talk more about the impact of those dead elephant carcasses on the ecology, on the land and the other animals around it, which is exactly where we want to be heading. So Miss Swanson's class, thank you for sticking around. Thank you for the great questions. Can you unmute and give Ryan a big thank you and goodbye? Awesome. Well, Ryan, that's all the time we have today. Thank you so much for all the great answers to the questions. Thanks for joining us from Kruger National Park, telling us about your field work. We have a lot more to go on this journey together with you. We'll be connecting with Ryan again very soon. And until then, there are more articles to come on his Journey homepage. You can even see some more pictures of young Ryan growing up, becoming the ecologist he is today on some of his first articles. So make sure you visit the Journey homepage at reachtheworld.org. You can see the link in the chat. Be sure to check back weekly for the latest articles. We're glad to be on this journey with you all. And until next time, take care, Ryan. To all our students, keep exploring, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.